Hi there, I'm going to share my sermon for today. This is on the Gospel reading. It is from Matthew 9 to 13, and then 18 to 26. The lectionary leaves out a few verses. You might as well read those few verses too, but I'm just going to be talking about the ones that are included in the lectionary. Feel free to pause the video, have a read. So in this Gospel reading, Matthew is being called by God. Matthew hears a call from Jesus, the human one, to come and follow him. And Matthew was an unpopular person among his neighbors because he was helping their enemies to screw everyone over. He was collecting tax to send to Rome, and he could keep whatever extra he could bring in. Every coin that he collected had the face of the Roman emperor on it. It was like whenever you used one of those coins, you were admitting that the emperor of Rome was in control of everything. So it was as though you were worshipping the emperor of Rome. On the other side, many of these coins had pictures of Rome's enemies being defeated. So these coins were being used to also announce that Rome had defeated the world and Rome was in control of the world. So Matthew was a collaborator. He was somebody who was dealing in suffering, dealing in dirty money. I don't think he would have expected a religious leader to call him and ask him to come and follow him. I don't think he would expect that a religious leader would come and want to sit at his table with his friends. When Jesus is sitting at Matthew's house at his table eating his food, that's all stuff that has been paid for by this tax that he's collected, by this dirty money. I know what I would think if I was seeing this. I'd be thinking, Jesus, do you know where this food is coming from? Do you know where this beautiful table has come from, how it's been paid for? Do you know who has paid for this beautiful house that Matthew lives in? Do you know how the common people have to suffer to support this kind of hospitality? That's what I'd be thinking, and that's what the Pharisees are saying, because they're wanting to live as ethically as they can according to what God has taught their people about the good way of living in the scripture. And the Pharisees want all kinds of people to know how they can live this good life. And Jesus says, look, those concerns are exactly why I'm spending my time with these people. These are the people that need my attention. You've already got a good idea of how to live a good life. You don't need my attention. And Jesus doesn't call the Pharisees to ever come and follow him in this story. He discusses things with them for sure. In the bit that's been left out of the lectionary, he's going more into their concerns and explaining what he's doing. And we see after this, in the second part of the reading, that Jesus definitely has plenty of time for more than just the people who are following him. Because a leader of the synagogue comes to Jesus with an emergency situation. His daughter has died. He's in grief, but he believes Jesus can bring her back. So we think he's the leader of the synagogue. This is a place where people gather on Saturday to worship, but it's also a place where work would go on during the week and people would gather during the week. It's a place where people would read the scripture and debate the best way to follow it and would discuss the traditions of interpreting the scripture. The Pharisees were involved in the synagogues a lot because it was very close to everyday life for Jewish people at that time. And they were concerned with how ordinary people live the good life. Now, a dead body in the house of one of the leaders of the synagogue means that his house and his family have all become ritually unclean for a certain amount of time. So the question is, would Jesus be willing to become ritually unclean by visiting them? Being ritually unclean means that you can't go to the temple, but it also means that other people might not want to associate with you or be in contact with you, because if they're in contact with you, they might become unclean and also not be able to go to the temple. But I wonder, if Jesus resurrects the girl, is there still uncleanness in the house and in the family? Is the synagogue leader still unclean? Maybe if she's resurrected, maybe he can still do his duties in the synagogue. And will Jesus become unclean if he goes to the house and resurrects her? Jesus doesn't seem to be worried about this. He goes and he takes his whole entourage of followers with him too to visit this unclean house. But there's someone else there who wants Jesus' attention too. There's a woman who's had a condition for 12 years that's made her bleed constantly, and it probably means that she hasn't been able to be a mother. And if she'd been unclean for 12 years because of this condition, she would not have been able to go to the temple for all that time, and people wouldn't have wanted to associate with her for all those years either. Women had to deal with this every month, but this woman had to deal with it all the time for 12 years. But like the synagogue leader, she believes Jesus can help her, but she doesn't ask Jesus to help her because she's heard this tradition, a tradition that a lot of Protestant Christians would probably call a superstition. She's heard this tradition that says that if you touch the tassels on the clothes of a holy man, that means you can receive healing. You might see Jewish people in the community sometimes wearing a shirt that has a whole lot of tassels on it, and this is the kind of tassels that it's talking about. So she doesn't ask for help, she just reaches out and touches one of the tassels. She's trying to do it secretly in the crowd, but Jesus notices. I wonder how Jesus would feel as he's on the way to the home of this girl who has died and somebody's reached out in the crowd and touched him. He might be upset that an unclean person has secretly touched his clothes. But he looks at her and he doesn't see her as unclean. He sees her as his daughter. He calls her his daughter. He says that he cares for her in the same way that the synagogue leader cares for his daughter. And he affirms her faith. He says, "Your faith has made you well." He doesn't say that she needs to stop what she's doing and learn to follow the right way from him. I wonder, what does this mean for the purity status of everybody involved? Because Jesus has now been touched in public by an unclean person. Everybody has seen this. It can't be hidden, even if the uncleanness in the house of the synagogue leader's daughter can be overlooked. Unclean Jesus has to be welcomed into the unclean home of a well-to-do family now. And a miracle happens. Maybe if we all share our uncleanness or our shame, our dishonor, our sin, maybe if we share that with each other, it can stop isolating us. Jesus doesn't call the synagogue leader and his family to become disciples either. Jesus leaves them to keep on following the good way that they know. But I think everybody has been changed. Even if they haven't converted from one religion to another, their faith has been changed. Now, God does have a church. We Christians are being called to follow Jesus and to gather together and encourage each other in that. But what God is doing in the world is bigger than just the church. We are called to invite other people to follow Jesus. We're called to disciple others. But we're not called to take over the world like Rome did. We're called to be present to our neighbours, whether or not they've heard the call to follow Jesus. God is still at work in the world. God is still saving the world. And we should be curious about what our role is in that. Let's look out for ways to be present in the lives of our neighbours and to see how God might be at work in the world around us.